Malfurion Stormrage was the first mortal druid on Azeroth and the night elf who, under the tutelage of the demigod Cenarius, started the popular practice of druidism among the Kaldorei people 10 millennia ago. He is Illidan Stormrage's twin brother, as well as the adoring and devoted spouse of Tyrande the Whisperwind, Elun's high priestess. Since the fall of Queen Azshara and her highborn caste, the two have represented the highest leadership of the Night Elves. During the mythical war in the Ancients, the Night Elves used Malfurion's advice to effectively stop the Burning Legion's initial invasion on Azeroth. He rose to become the greatest of the world's archdruids as a result of it. Malfurion and his druids slept for 10,000 years to safeguard the Emerald Dream and recreate the world, while his girlfriend Tyrande was elevated to General of the Sentinels and sent to guard Kalimdor. The Night Elves were later led by Malfurion and Tyrande in the Third War, defeating the Burning Legion, much as they had done in the past in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. During his time in the Emerald Dream, he eventually became unconscious. Malfurion and Tyrande married after recovering from the Cataclysm and now governed their people as one. Shan'do, which means respected teacher in Darnassian, is a common nickname for Malfurion. He is one of the mightiest and most respected mortals of the Warcraft realm, profoundly connected to the ebbs and flows of life of Azeroth and carrying eons of duty and wisdom. Malfurion is one of the primary characters in the Warcraft universe. Malfurion and his twin brother Illidan were born in Val'Sharah's Lorithil and grew up in Suramar as Tyrande the Whisperwind's pals. His residence as a young adult was by a waterfall just outside of Suramar, which he picked because of its solitude and unspoiled environment. Malfurion was Cenarius' most devoted follower, studying the skill of druidism in the Val'Sharah forest. Malfurion was a distinguished scholar dedicated to his revered Queen Azshara in the ancient world before the Great Sundering, having been the first mortal druid on Azeroth under the tutelage of the wise Cenarius. He was one among the first to discover Azshara and her followers maintaining their distance from their people, and he started to think that the abilities bestowed by the Well of Eternity were not as pure as everyone had assumed. Malfurion knew the Kaldorei would be eternally transformed, even if he couldn't grasp what was about to happen. Azshara and her Highborn were fascinated by the well, and they were given orders to learn all they could about it. The Highborn learned to take power from the well and harness its energies throughout time. Finally, Sargeras, enemy of all life and lord of the Burning Legion, was drawn to Azshara's rash use of magic. Azshara's Highborn sorcerer, led by High Lord Councillor Xavius, opened a portal in Azshara's palace, allowing hordes of demons into Kalimdor, including the Legion's commanders, Archimonde, Manoroth and Hakar the Houndmaster, to run rampant among the lands and strike down all who stood in their way. The Night Elves fought back valiantly, but there were just too many of them to help. The Burning Legion was on its way to victory. The Highborn also succeeded in casting a larger gateway across the Well of Eternity, allowing Sargeras to be summoned. Malfurion Stormrage sprang from the ranks of the desperate Kaldorei. Malfurion and his love, Tyrande the Whisperwind, High Priestess of Elun, swiftly rushed to seek out the demigod Cenarius, in the hopes that he could have mercy for their oppressed people after persuading his twin brother Illidan to forgo the use of magic. Malfurion realized that even with the support of Cenarius and Alexstrasza the Dragon Queen, his people would not be able to withstand the relentless bombardment of demonic invaders. Malfurion intended to destroy the Well of Eternity since he believed it was their portal. The Night Elves reluctantly decided to attack Azshara's fortress to put a stop to the invasion, knowing that destroying it would make them mortal and without any power. However, Illidan refused to give up his power, driven by his addiction to magic and his unfulfilled love for Tyrande, and abandoned their resistance to alert the Highborn. Knowing that Illidan will be there soon, Malfurion struck right away to keep them off guard. Azshara and their Highborn were ready for them, and Malfurion's armies were torn to bits by Azshara's chaotic magics. The sight of Tyrande being slain by Azshara's former Highborn, now changed into satyrs, gave Malfurion the courage to make one more attack. The portal was thrown out of its magical alignment by Azshara's struggle with Malfurion, and the vortex became unstable. Malfurion performed a spell to summon a massive storm that would tear all the demons from the earth and transport them to the twisting nether and the well. The Well of Eternity then began to fall in on itself, absorbing land, Azshara's palace and the destroyed city of Zin-Azshari. Despite the fact that Sargeras was aware that the gateway was shutting, he attempted the unthinkable. He attempted to reconstruct the portal and reach Azeroth by stepping through it. Sargeras was stuck within the vortex when it ultimately collapsed. The world was shattered forever as the Well of Eternity erupted in a cataclysmic explosion. Malfurion, on the other hand, was spared. Malfurion, Tyrande and Cenarius decided to lead their people to a new home by building rudimentary boats and sailing to what become Kalimdor. To their dismay, however, the magical forces of the Well of Eternity had contaminated a lake atop Mount Hyjal, which they had assumed had vanished forever. Illidan had stolen 7 vials of the well's water and spilled 3 of them into the lake, creating a new Well of Eternity, in order to preserve the arcane power he was addicted to. Malfurion imprisoned his brother in the Barrow Deeps, the tunnels under Hyjal, knowing that Illidan's addiction to magic would always be a danger to the world's stability. Malfurion and the Night Elves, on the other hand, were afraid to destroy the new well since the Sundering was still fresh in their memories. Malfurion would subsequently admit that he visited Illidan in jail on occasion in the hopes of persuading him to change his fate. Malfurion sought the advice of the Aspects and summoned Alexstrasza, Ysera, and Nosdormu, who had returned from their hiding places and were surprised to learn of the new well. They were all certain that the Burning Legion would track down its energies and return to Azeroth. Malfurion agreed, and they all promised to keep the well secure. To that aim, they erected Nordrassil, the World Tree, which they promised would preserve the Well of Eternity and the Night Elves. The tree was grown by Alexstrasza, the Lifebinder, from an enchanted acorn from Granir. The tree was enchanted by Nosdormu, the Timeless, with the promise that the Night Elves would never die of old age or disease as long as it stood. Nordrassil was joined to the Emerald Dream by Ysera, the Dreamer. She would gradually reconstruct the planet via the tree. She did, however, need consciousness to traverse the Emerald Dream's everlasting paths in order to keep it alive. To keep it going, all the Druids decided to sleep for centuries at a time, despite the years they'd miss out on and be permanently bound to the Emerald Dream. In the Ashenvale woodland around Hyjal, Malfurion and Tyrande assisted their people in rebuilding their civilization. Cenarius taught them the secrets of the wood, and Malfurion gained in strength as he studied the druidic craft, eventually becoming the first archdruid among his people. Malfurion and his druid kindred slept happily for many years, despite his desire to be with Tyrande, until they were all awoke by Deathromar and the highborn survivors. He was swiftly defeated, but with so many lives already gone, the druids unwilling to kill him. Therefore Malfurion decreed that the Highborn be banished. Deathromar and his followers became the High Elves later on. Malfurion left Tyrande to rejoin the Emerald Dream, resting into his lengthy slumber in Malfurion's barrow den in Moonglade despite his sorrow. Malfurion and the other Druids were said to have slept for 10 millennia between the War of the Ancients and the Third War, only waking up in times of great danger. Most sources believe that the Druids awoke every few centuries to connect with their spouses, sisters and daughters, and there was a cycle. The cycle might be readily broken if necessary, but the Druids must return to the dream as soon as possible. Malfurion developed the lupine pack form, while experimenting with the Druid's shapeshifting talents. Malfurion's savage nature, on the other hand, was too much for him to manage, and he erupted in wrath, even attacking Cenarius. Malfurion's rage was soothed by the demigod, who made him sleep under the mighty tree Daralnir, in the Emerald Dream. Malfurion forbade all of his pupils from utilizing the pack form after that, but despite his attempts, a cult known as the Druids of the Pack arose. The satyrs collected a few demons that survived after the Battle of the Ancients and waged war throughout Ashvale. Even after Arvel died, because he pledged he would not utilize the metamorphosis, R'hllor Fangfire pushed for their Shan'do to abolish the restrictions on the pack form, but Malfurion was determined. The Druids who follow R'hllor ultimately became the first Worgen in a bid to manage the pack form and prove Malfurion incorrect about his brutality, using a scythe forged from Goldrin Fang and a staff blast by Elune. While the Worgen were powerful against the satyrs, they would often damage friends in their ferocious battles. Malfurion convened a gathering in the Moonglade for the Druids who refused to join R'hllor, now known as Alpha Prime. The established principles for all future Druids to follow, determined on steps to take against the Worgen, and founded by the Cenarian Circle with Cenarius' permission. The discussion was interrupted by the priestess Belisra Starbreeze, a friend of R'hllor and the mate of late Arvel, who presented the Scythe of Elune to Malfurion. Malfurion mournfully used the Scythe of Elune to shut the Worgen away in the Emerald Dream, trapping them under Daralnir, after meeting Alpha Prime and his troops in a field of Peacebloom. Fandral Staghelm pulled branches from Nordrassil, the Globe Tree, and planted them over Serenite that had started to develop all over the world, including a particularly significant supply of Serenite in the Grizzly Hills, 4,500 years before the First War. 5 of them became great trees, and the World Tree he planted in the Grizzly Hills was given the name Andrassil, which means Crown of the Snow. When Malfurion Stormrage and the rest of the Cenarian Circle learned that these branches had been planted without their permission, they were enraged. They did agree, however, that the strategy seemed to have succeeded, and everything appeared to be well for many decades until Yogg-Saron poisoned the tree. Tyrande was compelled to rouse the Druids 10,000 years later by the Legion's second arrival. She reached the Horn of Cenarius after defeating the grove's 3 enchanted keepers, Lightning Protector, Fire Protector, and Ice Protector. Malfurion was startled awake by the sound of Cenarius' horn. Even in the Emerald Dream he sensed the filth and decay of his home, and when he awoke, he summoned Trent from the forest to fend against the undead invaders who were closing in on his den. Archimonde had returned to Kalimdor, and he had taken the Burning Legion with him. According to Tyrande, who was responsible for his waking, Malfurion recognized the Warlock's goal right away. He would attack Mount Hyjal and try to drain Nordrassil's magical powers. Their aim was simple: rouse the Druids and stop Archimonde. While Malfurion witnessed the Outlander races fighting the undead, he realized that they may be useful allies in the future struggle. Tyrande, on the other hand, quickly dismissed the concept, claiming that they had murdered Cenarius and therefore deserved whatever destiny the undead had in store for them. As they sought to rouse the Talon's Druids, sleeping in the Druid of the Talon's Barrow Den in Winterspring, their violent nature became increasingly apparent. Tyrande discovered a group of furbolgs who had been corrupted by the deepening gloom, whom she had attempted to help in Nashenville. All of them were slain by Tyrande's soldiers. They battled their way through the undead, encountering orcs and humans at every turn, until they arrived at the Barrow Dens, when Malfurion sounded the Horn of Cenarius. The Talon Druid awakened, promising to assist Malfurion in reawakening the Claw Druids in Mount Hyjal Barrow Deeps. Malfurion and Tyrande found huge spiders and other monsters, significantly altered by demonic taint. Even inside the Sanctuary of Hyjal, they were entered by rocky tunnels. They soon came upon a passage that led to the halls where Malfurion's evil brother Illidan was being kept. Tyrande entered the jail to release Illidan despite Malfurion's protestations. Malfurion proceeded on, only to discover that the Claws Druids had forgotten who they were and had embraced their wild bear forms rather than their night elf ones. The Druids' thoughts had become indistinguishable, like bears, making them hard to reason with. Malfurion, however, freed them from this condition with the Horn of Cenarius. The Claw Druids volunteered to battle the Legion because they were grateful to have their brains restored. Tyrande had freed Illidan in the meanwhile, thinking that he might help with the war effort as well. Despite this, Malfurion refused to forgive Illidan for his treachery after all these years. Illidan reminded Malfurion that they had previously battled demons together, but Malfurion was certain he would have none of it. Illidan led a band of night elves into the fell which corrupted trees to fight Tichondrius. Tyrande and Malfurion hurried to Illidan's aid, but Illidan was already triumphant and in the shape of a gigantic demon when they arrived. Illidan had claimed the Skull of Gul'dan's abilities as his own in order to earn the ability to kill Tichondrius. Malfurion and Tyrande couldn't believe Illidan's fateful decision, so Malfurion exiled him from the woods forever. Illidan made no attempt to reason with his brother and went on his own. Malfurion had a vision later that night. A giant raven appeared to him and urged him to take Tyrande to Mount Hyjal's base. Curious, he followed the instructions and met Jaina and Thrall, the commanders of Kalimdor's Outlander armies. Tyrande had reprimanded them and was ready to fight them when the raven came, showing himself to be Medivh, Tirisfal's final guardian. In a last-ditch attempt to halt Archimonde's continuous attack on the World Tree, Medivh persuaded the Night Elves to join forces with the Outlanders. Tyrande agreed, though grudgingly. Malfurion devised an offensive plan from the Sacrifice, atop Hyjal's peak, where the World Tree and the Well of Eternity resided. The defenders erected fortifications all the way up the mountains in preparation for Archimonde's climb. Malfurion understood that what he needed to do to destroy Archimonde. He needed to release the World's Tree powers under strong demon ruler. Archimonde laid siege to Hyjal with the help of 3 of his most powerful surviving lieutenants: the Lich Rage Winterchill, Ascalor, successor of Manoroth, and Anatheron, successor of Tichondrius, tearing through Jaina and Thrall's bases. Finally, he arrived at Tyrande's final bastion, ripped it apart, blasted through the magical gates, and proceeded to the World Tree. Tyrande and Malfurion stood there watching as he came, oblivious to the ancestral guardians who had collected around the World's Tree base throughout the conflict. Archimonde had become overconfident as a result of his win and over the desperate defenders, and he was fully oblivious of the trap they had laid for him. Malfurion sounded the Cenarius horn as Archimonde approached the tree. Thousands of ancestral guardians were roused from the trees and attacked Archimonde, detonating in a massive explosion that unmade Archimonde and incinerated the forest atop Hyjal. shattering the World Tree and ending the immortality of the Night Elves. Malfurion and Tyrande remained in Hyjal to start the process of reconstruction. Malfurion and Tyrande were unexpectedly met by a runner from Maiev the Warden, pleading for assistance against Illidan while checking on Nordrassil one day. The former demon hunter had reappeared and enlisted the help of Naga, a race of amphibious snake people who had become involved in the attempted slaughter of Shadowsong and her troops. Malfurion and Tyrande left right away to help them. Malfurion enlisted the help of mountain giants in the battle, and they fought their way through hordes of Naga to reach Maiev. When they did, she was furious with Tyrande because the priestess had freed Illidan by killing many of Maia's watcher guards. Malfurion intervened to prevent the two women from fighting and advised them to put their personal feud aside until Illidan was dealt with. They fought the Naga valiantly until they came face to face with Illidan after he kidnapped Tyrande. But he let her go with a warning not to follow him, and he fled before they could catch him. They followed him across the sea and arrived on Lordaeron's shores. Malfurion retreated into the woods and to commune with the forest spirits, troubled by the corruption of the forests, but commanded Maiev and Tyrande to put their differences aside for the time being while they searched for Illidan. Malfurion felt the earth's pain as he entered the woods and was greeted by a benevolent forest spirits who gave him a vision of Northrend, which was crumbling due to Illidan's reckless magics with the Eye of Sargeras. Malfurion feared for the world and vowed to put an end to his brother's plans. He couldn't see Tyrande when he found Maiev. Tyrande had been killed in battle, according to Maiev. Infuriated, Malfurion led his forces against Illidan's Nagas, defeating Illidan's forces and capturing him with the help of Maiev and her new ally Kael'thas, as well as the paladin Mygroth the Defender. Malfurion accused Illidan of killing Tyrande, but Kael chimed in, saying that it was too soon to assume she was dead because she had only been swept down a river. Malfurion realized he had been duped and entangled Maiev before leaving to look for Tyrande, with Illidan offering his Naga to scour the river. Tyrande and a small group of sentinels were desperately finding the undead when they found her. While Malfurion fought off the undead attackers, Illidan fought his way through the river with his Naga. Finally, they were able to push through the undead forces and Illidan was able to save Tyrande. Illidan was grateful when Tyrande was returned to Malfurion by Illidan. Illidan had earned his freedom, he decided, but Malfurion warned his brother that if he ever bothered with the Night Elves again, he would be less forgiving. Illidan agreed to the terms and activated the magical portal. Maiev caught up with them as he fled, and scolded Malfurion and Tyrande for allowing Illidan to flee. She and her watchers followed Illidan into his portal in a rage. Tyrande attempted to stop her, but Malfurion let her go, knowing that nothing he said would persuade her otherwise. Malfurion and Tyrande departed with a heavy sigh, returning to their own realms and people. There was still work to be done. Malfurion and Tyrande helped their people rebuild their shattered villages in the aftermath of the horrific conflict, and they briefly ruled their people. He also became friends with Hamul Runetotem, whom he began teaching druidic art and blessing with the touch of nature. In order to reclaim their immortality, a group of misbehaving druids planned to plant a special tree that would restore a link between their spirits and the eternal world. When Malfurion learned of the plan, he warned that such a selfish act would not be rewarded by nature. Malfurion entered the Emerald Dream to regain his strength, but when Fandral Staghelm ambushed him in the Barrow Den, his spirits became lost within the dream's depths. Though his fellow druids attempted to locate his wandering spirit, only his body remained sleeping within his Barrow Den. Fandral Staghelm, Malfurion's top lieutenant with whom he had clashed and the leader of those who wished to plant the New World Tree, became the new archdruid of the Druids when Malfurion went missing. He and his fellow Druids, as well as the convinced circle of ancients from Darkshore, had forged ahead and planted Teldrassil, the great tree, off the stormy coast of northern Kalimdor in no time. Something went wrong with Malfurion's dream state, trapping him somewhere within the dream, far beyond the reach of the green dragons in charge. During Vanilla, he was said to be fighting alongside Cenarius' spirit against the Nightmare, according to in-game quests. The condition of Malfurion was kept a state secret. Only the Cenarian Circle and the Sisterhood of Elune's highest-ranking members were aware of it. Malfurion was comatose prior to the events of World of Warcraft, and he remained that way throughout the Burning Crusade and the invasion of Northrend, only waking up after the defeat of the Lich King. This did not deter him from attempting to protect Azeroth. During the Green Shard fork of the Scepter of the Shifting Sands quest chain, he appeared twice via the Emerald Dream, once in Moonglade and again in the Temple of Atul-Hakar. A nightmare-engulfed object was obtained by defeating any of the nightmare dragons when brought to Remulos. A vision of Malfurion appeared. still trapped in the Emerald Dream, and spoke with Keeper Remulus about the 4 dragons' disturbing rise on the Emerald Nightmare. Malfurion reappeared in the Temple of Atlhakar during the Scepter of the Shifting Sands quest chain, confirming the existence of an old god corrupting the Emerald Dream. Malfurion was kept in the Emerald Dream by Fandral Staghelm, who used the Morrow grain collected by adventurers to slowly kill his Shando's physical body, according to the novel Stormrage. Malfurion was kidnapped in the Emerald Dream and tortured by the Nightmare Lord in order for the Nightmare Lord to conquer both of the Emerald Dream and Azeroth. The Emerald Nightmare, a terrible plague that covers the Emerald Dream, was ruled by the Nightmare Lord, who was later revealed to be Malfurion's old nemesis, Xavius. Malfurion conjured up false dreams about Tura's uncle, Broxigar's death, in order to entice her to him in the Emerald Dream. Thura was able to enter the Emerald Dream and reach Malfurion's entrapment in the tree. Unfortunately, Tyrande and her allies were also trapped in the dream, and despite his warnings to keep Tyrande away, she persisted in her desire to stop Thura. Thura was eventually able to free Malfurion by cutting the tree form that had been imprisoning him. He did, however, see something unexpected. Lathan and his Emerald Nightmare entice Ysera into a trap. Malfurion realized at that point that Ysera had been the Nightmare Lord's main target all along, while Malfurion had been trapped only for personal reasons. The Emerald Dream was escaped by Malfurion, Tyrande, Brawl, Lucan Foxblood, and Thura, and Malfurion's dream form returned to his body in the Moonglade, where the Nightmare was also present. He flew to Ashenvale from there, where he saw the corrupted Teldrassil. As he got closer, he noticed Druids attempting to heal the tree. Malfurion, on the other hand, realized what they were really doing. They were inadvertently corrupting it even more. Malfurion arrived at the Cenarion Enclave, where he discovered a Hamul rune totem trapped inside, as well as Naralex and Chandra's Feathermoon. He was immediately attacked by a crazed Fandral Staghelm, who was responsible for Teldrassil's corruption. Druids arrived at the Enclave during the battle, believing Brawl to be a traitor. However, Brawl tried to explain that it was Fandral who was the traitor. Malfurion had freed Hamul, Naralex and Chandris during the battle, and the Tauren and female Night Elf confirmed Fandral's treachery. Fandral cast a spell at that point and the Druids began to die. After destroying a shadow posing as Fandral's late son, Falstan, Malfurion was able to incapacitate him by driving him into a state of near catatonia. After seeing Brawl's gold eyes, Malfurion concluded that he had realized his true potential by assisting the other Druids. He then proceeded to Teldrassil's crown, where he discovered the true cause of Teldrassil's corruption, a grafted Xavius branch on the World Tree. Malfurion led all Druids in healing Teldrassil from Xavius' corruption after removing the branch. Alexstrasza was able to bless the World Tree after the healing was successful. The tree became the haven and monument it was meant to be from that point forward. All portals to the Emerald Dream were closed, according to the Dragon Queen, with the exception of Fandral's hidden portal, which Malfurion knew about. He then told Chandris to look after Darnassus' citizens and Brawl and Hamul to keep an eye on him while he used his dream form to travel all over Azeroth, including Stormwind, where he persuaded Varian to lead an army against the Nightmare, Thunderbluff, where Bane Bloodhoof aided him, and Dalaran, where they were all dreaming. He returned to his body after rallying the survivors of the Emerald Nightmare's attack, only to be greeted by Remulus, who informed him of Tyrande's kidnapping and the theft of the Axe of Cenarius. While Malfurion and Remulus entered the Nightmare, Brawl was assigned to coordinate the Dreamform army. When they arrived at the location where Tyrande and the Axe were being held, it was clear that Xavius had corrupted Remulus to use him as a pawn. To free Tyrande, Malfurion had to defeat the Moonclade's keeper. They then relocated to a more secure location, but they were still attacked by satyrs. While Tyrande invoked the Loon Smite to repel the satyrs, Malfurion dispatched Brawl to Thura, where he heard Ysera's voice, who, thanks to Lucan, was able to speak and reveal where she was imprisoned. Malfurion aided Irenicus in freeing Ysera, but Irenicus had to sacrifice himself to do so. Ysera was set free, but she was unable to save her consort or aid Malfurion in his plot. To rid Azeroth of the Nightmare, he decided to gather energy from both Azeroth and the Emerald Dream. Then he went after Xavius' tree in Azeroth, while Tura went after Xavius' shadow tree in the Emerald Dream. With Xavius dead, the Nightmare retreated into the Rift of Aln, where Xavius' master fought it to keep it at bay. The Nightmare's battle was over, and mortals fighting in the dream returned to Azeroth. Malfurion awoke in Darnassus, exhausted. Without wasting any time, the two were married in Darnassus, the capital city of the Night Elves. With the blessings of Ysera and Alexstrasza, Well wishes from the Alliance leaders and their friend and old compatriot, Thrall of the Horde. Malfurion and Tyrande, as the leaders of their people, attended a memorial gathering in Old Ironforge after King Magni Bronzebeard's petrification. Malfurion used his druids to survey the damaged Night Elf settlements after the Cataclysm caused a series of natural disasters across Azeroth. Though some settlements remain, others, such as those in Darkshore, were rendered impassable by strong wind currents and storms. Worse, the Naga have been reported invading the area recently. Tyrande Whisperwind accompanied Malfurion in the search for and rescue of General Chandra's Feathermoon. The two Night Elves rescued the critically injured general and dispatched the invading Naga force stationed at the Sardar Isle. Malfurion and Tyrande afterwards attended a memorial ceremony for those who fell during the recent terrible events and stood united against the flow and anguish and loss. Malfurion Stormrage has done his best to foster unity within the Alliance, but his obligations as a druid prompted him to concentrate more on the wilds. Both he and his mate Tyrande realized that someone else must take up the role of directing the Alliance, particularly because in the aftermath of the Cataclysm, they faced a reinvigorated horde commanded by a brutal new war chief. Both Malfurion and his partner set up a summit not just to propose the admission of the Worgen and Gilneas into the Alliance, but also to see whether one would emerge to lead the Alliance in this new world. A mission not easily done, since King Varian Rin nursed resentment against the newly humiliated King Gen Greymane. Malfurion also encountered additional challenges. Aside from dealing with the politics of the Alliance, there have been startling rumors of the Highborn being slain in Darnassus. Unbeknown to him, Malfurion had earned the ire of Maiev, who was angry that he had forgiven the Highborn and welcomed them back into the Night Elf society. Not only that, she resented Malfurion for not having Teldrassil properly sanctified, thereby preventing the Night Elves from recovering their immortality. Malfurion thought that the Night Elves had gotten too comfortable and jaded with their immortality and that it was time for them to once again start living mortal lives to better appreciate the earth. Maiev had intended on catching Malfurion and giving him a horrible, rotting death, yet her plans were stopped by her own brother, Jarod Shadowsong, who rescued him. Malfurion and Jarod then saved the Highborn from being killed by Maiev and drove her away. Later on, Jarod was assigned to oversee a new security unit, and Malfurion urged him not to pursue the road of obsession like Maiev did. Malfurion then observed the Worgen being formally admitted into the Alliance. In Darkshore, Malfurion has called a vast spinning vortex of air to fight the elementals. He is giving every ounce of his power to prevent Darkshore's entire landmass from being shattered and swept into the ocean, while the Night Elves and adventurers attempt to stop the rampaging elementals and save the Legion. He then took part in stopping the Naga and Twilight's hammer threat at the southern end of the region. Later on, the adventurer is sent to retrieve the Horn of the Ancients, revealing that Queen Azshara was responsible for the troubles of the zone, in order to keep Malfurion's attention away from the work being done in Hyjal. Malfurion then goes on to help the Guardians of Hyjal in fighting Ragnaros. In Hyjal, Malfurion leads the attack against the Firelord Ragnaros and takes part, along with Hamul and Cenarius, in sending the Firelord back to the Firelands. Malfurion gathered with his buddy Thrall and Thrall's partner Agra to unite the forces of the Druids and the Shamans in Hyjal. However, they are ambushed by a mystery adversary, who shatters Thrall's essence into the elemental worlds. Malfurion vows retribution on the person, who quickly shows himself as none other than Malfurion's former apprentice, the archdruid of Darnassus in his absence, Fandral Stackhelm. Fandral starts to take druids in his new perverted sect in service of Ragnaros, titled the Druids of the Flame. Liara, Fandral's daughter-in-law, who had blamed Malfurion's neutrality with the Horde for her daughter's murder, assaults and presumably kills Humul Runetotem, whose injured corpse is transported to the Sanctuary of Malorn for treatment. Malfurion subsequently tries to persuade Liara that Fandral's corruption goes too deep, yet she disregards his remarks, only paying heed when Malfurion reveals Humul is still alive. He watches as a reinvigorated Humul disposes of her and the two companions depart. Following Thrall's restoration, Malfurion is there with Tyrande to watch Agra and Thrall become life mates. During the raid into the Firelands, an enraged Fandral demands that his followers bring Malfurion to him alive. During the final battle against Ragnaros in his most powerful form, Malfurion alongside Cenarius and Hamul assists heroes in ending the Firelord's ambitions for good. His prior self appears in the Well of Eternity, published in patch 4.3, Hour of Twilight. While the players aid Illidan and Tyrande in battling Manoroth and Varuthun, Malfurion aids the aspects in closing the portal in the Well of Eternity, forcing the Burning Legion out of Azeroth. When the Horde was about to attack Theramore, Jaina asked Malfurion and Tyrande for warriors and ships. The archdruid and his wife sent Chandris and a group of sentinels to aid in the defense effort. Malfurion and his wife were also eager to support Varian in the counterattack by sending a few hundred ships. After Tyrande was chosen as the accuser in the trial of Garrosh Hellscream, during their dinner in Darnassus, Malfurion told her that he was worried about the trial might change her, as she was inciting hatred and a desire to condemn others, not using her beautiful heart. During the conflict in Draenor, Archimonde possessed a portion of power from the Rift of Aln that was supposed to have been locked away, which frightened Malfurion tremendously, since it likely signified that the Emerald Nightmare was obviously coming loose once again. He headed off towards Val'sharah, where he was initially taught as a druid, believing it to be a horrible omen. Despite their shared grief, Malfurion attends Warrior Wryn's funeral and says the Alliance must find balance. When Jace Darkweaver arrives at the funeral to inform the assembled leaders that Stormwind's guards have been infiltrated by the Legion, Malfurion is concerned about the demon hunters no longer being locked up. Malfurion collects a Mulro totem, Zantabra, Narlax, Remulos, and an adventurer in the Moonglade to create a gateway through the Emerald Dream to Val'sharah's Dream Grove. Malfurion names the adventurer an archdruid of the Cenarian Circle when they obtain a powerful item. Val'sharah is a home to the Tears of Elune, one of the pillars of creation required to seal the Tomb of Sargeras and end the Burning Legion's assault. Malfurion informs Khadgar and Dalaran that recovering the relic should be straightforward, and that's all he has to do is ask Cenarius for it. However, when Malfurion arrives in the Grove of Cenarius, he learns that his Shan'do has been plagued by the Emerald Nightmare and is unable to wake. Distraught, Malfurion summons 3 ancient archdruids to the Forest Lord's aid, Coda Steelclaw, Theon Moonclaw, and Elothere. Theon is corrupted by the revived Xavius and eventually killed while Coda and Elothere are collected. Malfurion, Elothere, and Coda approach Ysera for assistance, believing that the Tears of Elune may rescue Cenarius. Xavius, on the other hand, is attacking the temple where they have been imprisoned. Before Malfurion can utilize the Tears of Elune to rescue Cenarius, the Nightmare Lord snatches them. Without the tears, Cenarius falls prey to corruption, while Malfurion, enraged by the loss of his Shan'do, chases Xavius. Unfortunately for Malfurion, Xavius is not through with him. When Ysera and an adventurer track him down, he is able to corrupt the former Aspect herself, turning her into a nightmare dragon. With Malfurion held captive, Xavius and Ysera flee, followed by an adventurer and Tyrande, who had arrived after seeing a vision of her husband. With Malfurion imprisoned, Xavius offers the High Priestess a choice: pursue him and spend her husband's final moments by his side, or return to the Temple of Elune to defend it from Xavius' forces led by Ysera. Tyrande, bereft and saddened, chooses her goddess above her love. Despite the fact that the choice pains her, Tyrande assigns adventurers to track down Xavius and Malfurion after Ysera's death. Malfurion is liberated and Xavius' shadow on Azeroth is slain at the Darkheart Ticket, but his actual form still lurks inside the Nightmare. Malfurion aids adventurers in the Emerald Nightmare against his fallen Shan'do. They are able to get through to Cenarius thanks to Malfurion's pleading, and although he is battered, the powerful demigod is simply unconscious. Malfurion concentrates all of his efforts on purifying Cenarius. Malfurion is afraid to enter the Rift of Aln since, although his tie to the Emerald Dream gives him enormous strength, it also leaves him susceptible to the Rift's darkness. If he did, he would be kidnapped by the Nightmare, just as Cenarion was. Malfurion leaves his Shan'do behind to entrust adventurers with slaying Xavius, cleansing the Emerald Dream and saving Azeroth. When an Alliance player earns Prestige rank 2, Malfurion along with other famous Alliance leaders may be found at Stormwind Keep. During a royal audience, he attends a ceremony organized by King Anduin Wrynn, in which the characters congratulated for their fights against the Horde, as well as an artifact appearance after receiving the Grand Marshal's Medal of Valor from the King. A rejuvenated Illidan produces a crystal with a message for Malfurion after leaving for Antorus the Burning Throne for the last fight with the Legion. Despite Malfurion's suspicion, he talked about how Cenarius' teachings were not for him as they were for his brother, and how all the power he desired was not to conquer or dominate but to rescue Azeroth. Though Illidan conceded, he did not make it simple for Malfurion to do so. With his fate revealed, Illidan wished to put an end to the animosity that had been long existed between them and entrust the safety of the world to his brother, whom he trusted more than anyone else to face threats. Malfurion has spent a lifetime battling for Azeroth's potential, but now he must fight for what it is. Illidan begged Malfurion to look after Tyrande and to heed her advice, for she was always the best among them. The journey ahead would be hard, but he knew Malfurion would uphold the Stormrage name no matter what. Malfurion responded by saying that his brother made selfish decisions that caused so much grief to so many people, and that his misdeeds were difficult to forgive. Nonetheless, he remembered the moments when they battled together for a single cause and common goal, referring to them as the Golden Days. This was not the time to reflect on personal regrets after the harm Sargeras had inflicted on Silithus. Malfurion announced that they must concentrate on global healing. Throughout the Whisperwind and Malfurion Stormrage met with King Anduin Wrynn after learning of Azeroth's terrible situation to discuss the Night Elves' efforts in amending Azeroth and their studies into Azerite. The Cenarian Circle has dispatched Druids to Silithus to inspect the damage, according to Malfurion. Malfurion said as they rode through Darnassus on Nightsabers that Sargeras' devastation had killed all of the Cenarian Hold's Druids, and Tyrande had sent priestesses of Elune to assist when she learned of their deaths. Although the Night Elves intended to build moonwells to treat Silithus' wounds, their priestesses and druids were unable to complete the task due to the goblins stealing Azerite from the area. The Night Elves, on the other hand, discovered an Azerite vein and gathered samples to analyze. Malfurion assured Anduin that, although he couldn't deny the potency of Azerite, the Night Elves would do all in their ability to keep it from being misused. Tyrande presented Anduin to Sentinel Cordressa Briarbow, whose troop was guarding the Explorers' League. Anduin praised Tyrande for her foresight and offered some of his own warriors to defend the future trips. A gnome Kirantor mage portaled in to deliver a message from Caligos during their conversation. Jaina Pradmore had paid him a visit, and Caligos told Anduin that she would be unreachable for the time being. Anduin said that the communication included Jaina, and that all of the leaders expressed their desire that Jaina will return to their active service in their alliance at some point. Anduin returned to Stormwind after finishing their business. The Horde started to assault Ashenvale when the Night Elf fleet was on their way to Silithus and Tyrande was in Stormwind City. Malfurion and Darnassus received a hastily sent warning from the Sentinels in Ashenvale. Malfurion dispatched Sentinel Ariadnar to tell the Alliance leadership of the invasion and to inform them that he would delay the Horde's approach until reinforcements arrive after being informed on the situation. He'll also be evacuating Darnassus and Darkshore population and transporting them to Stormwind. Malfurion also ordered Tashara, a druid apprentice, to summon the Night Elf fleet on way to Silithus. With luck, the Night Elf defenders will buy enough time for the inhabitants to be evacuated and reinforcements to arrive in time to repel the Horde. Malfurion sent a squad of druids to Captain Dalarin Summermoon, instructing her to halt the Horde's advance until he arrived. On his route to the battlefront, Malfurion came upon a group of druids being attacked by Horde invaders. While paying his respect to his deceased druids' brothers and sisters, he advised the only survivor, Farron, to go. Captain Summermoon managed to hold off the Horde at the Fall Farron River for a time, but the Horde finally overpowered their fortifications. Malfurion arrived at the edge of the woodlands as the Horde stormed the Night Elf's side of the river and ordered Summermoon's besieged men to flee while he and a few defenders protected them. Malfurion Stormrage talked to High Overlord Saurfang from the cover of the trees as the Night Elves retreated further into the woodland. Saurfang said that the Night Elves' lands will soon be seized by the Horde and offered to the Night Elves the opportunity to go in peace. Malfurion replied that the Horde would pay in blood for each step forward. Malfurion tore into the Horde at Ashenvale's northern boundaries. He was attacked by a Horde rogue called Lorash Sunbeam as he sought to slow down the Horde. Malfurion, on the other hand, was much too swift for Lorash and effortlessly escaped his onslaught. To subjugate the Blood Elf, he conjured roots. Malfurion sought to persuade Lorash that his hatred was irrational, reminding him that the Kaldurai and Sindarai had once lived, fought and died together. Lorash, on the other hand, claimed that Malfurion was the one who caused the schism between their people by exiling his forefathers. Lorash held Malfurion responsible for his people's suffering while attempting to establish themselves in the Eastern Kingdoms, and he had personally lost kin to Severe, Winters, Vicious Trolls and the Scourge. Despite the conflicts between their groups, Malfurion argued that his people, having recently repulsed the Burning Legion and lost their country, have never considered assaulting Quel'Thalas. When Lorash continued to show no remorse for his hate and taunted Malfurion over losing his home, Malfurion felt sorry for him and remarked he is happy for the majority of his people is not as lost. Their chat was cut short when Sylvanas Windrunner launched an attack. Malfurion defended himself by crushing Lorash's neck with his roots while shouting that the Horde had not yet invaded his lands. Malfurion eluded Sylvanas and proceeded to wreak havoc on the Horde in the shadows. He circled back south to Astronar, where Captain Summermoon was luring Varrock Saurfang out in the open in preparation for an ambush. Saurfang sensed the trap and was ready to retreat to safety when he enticed out of his inn. Malfurion, on the other hand, arrived just in time to attack at Saurfang, generating enough commotion for Captain Summermoon's soldiers to surprise the Horde guards. Saurfang was chased by Malfurions to Astronar's inn, where he summoned an overgrowth to devour Saurfang and the inn. Malfurion was challenged to a Magura by Saurfang, but Malfurion was unconcerned with orcish duels and just wanted to capture Saurfang. Malfurion ultimately overpowered Saurfang and bound his legs with roots. When Saurfang was trapped in a falling inn, he realized there was nothing he could do to stop Malfurion's might. However, as the inn started to crumble around them, Sylvanas Windrunner launched a black magic arrow at Malfurion, diverting his attention away from Saurfang. Sylvanas had rallied the Horde and forced Malfurion to flee with them after routing the Night Elf troops. Saurfang's presence in Zormgor proved he had survived the ambush, despite the fact that he had last seen being buried by collapsing debris. Malfurion used roots and a wall of wisps to hold off the Horde troops, including Sylvanas, in the Twilight Vale of Darkshore. The ghosts of Astronar's deceased were among the wisps he summoned. When Captain Dalwyn Summermoon reported that Sylvanas had arrived at Zormgar outpost, Malfurion instructed her to gather as many Night Elf troops as she could from the surrounding outposts. Malfurion also tasked an adventurer with putting down the Blackwood Firbolgs who had been enraged by the Horde destruction of Darkshore, as well as gathering Druids to meet at the Grove of the Ancients. Malfurion later led the Alliance forces in battle against the Horde at the Wildbend River, but due to the Horde's superior numbers he decided to regroup in Darnassus. They met up with Malfurion at Ruthtaron village, where Malfurion greeted the recalled Night Elf fleet. The Night Elves made their final stand shortly after. However, the conflict shifted as the Horde entered Darkshore from the north, enticing the Wisp to a no front. The Wisp wall started to dissolve as the Wisp were distracted, enabling the Horde army to penetrate Darkshore. Malfurion knew he couldn't rescue his people, but he could at least lessen the damage. He instructed Tashara to deliver a message he had written to Tyrande, indicating that he would attempt to murder Sylvanas on his own. Malfurion consoled Captain Summermoon and praised her efforts when she became despondent. He gave her orders to lead her soldiers to Mist Edge and do everything they could. Malfurion then traveled to face Sylvanas and her army, telling her that there would be no forgiveness for her crimes, to which Sylvanas replied that she was well aware. Malfurion battled Sylvanas outside Lord Danel, and despite Sylvanas calling on several Horde soldiers for assistance, she was apparently nearly killed by Malfurion. However, Saurfang came, and in a fit of rage and despair he hit Malfurion from behind, catching him off guard and hurting him badly. Despite Sylvanas praising him and giving him the ultimate blow, Saurfang felt guilt for what he had considered a shameful conduct. Shortly before heading for the World Tree, Sylvanas charged Saurfang with assassinating Malfurion, but Saurfang couldn't bring himself to murder Malfurion, whose last words were to tell him that he had led the Horde in the service of death and that it was rue his day until his own death. When Tyrande arrived, she defeated Saurfang but spared his life for not killing Malfurion, then healed her husband and returned to Stormwind with him, using a Heartstone from Anduin, but not before harshly criticizing Saurfang for participating in this dishonorable war and darkly warning him that they would return to reclaim their homeland. Malfurion and Tyrande returned to Stormwind Keep when Malfurion had completely healed. Tyrande returned to Darkshore later to perform the Night Warrior's ritual, the manifestation of Elun's rage. The Night Warrior was claimed to have been utilized by the Night Elves to carve out their kingdom long ago. Since then, no one has tried the ceremony, since Elun's sheer strength has ripped them apart. Tyrande made it through despite the threat. Shortly after she battled with Deathstalker Commander Belmont and his soldiers, Malfurion ran across his sweetheart in the Ashwood Depot in Darkshore. Despite Malfurion's desire to battle with Tyrande against Nathanos Blightcaller and his two Valkyr, Tyrande advised him to remain on the sidelines until she gave the command. Nathanos was trying to raise both Dalryn and Cero Moonwarden on the beach outside Lordanel, when Tyrande came just in time to rescue them both. Tyrande was shackled by the Valkyr Brynja midway through her battle with Nathanos, but she quickly broke free and used the Night Warrior's power to strike the area in darkness. Malfurion then joined her, fighting Brynja in bear form while Tyrande handled Nathanos. The Valkyr, on the other hand, was successful in raising Dalryn and Cero. Despite Tyrande's best efforts to persuade them otherwise, they blamed her and Elun for abandoning them and declared their allegiance to the Forsaken. Tyrande slew Brynja angrily as the Horde fled, and while Malfurion wanted to pursue them, Tyrande persuaded him to withdraw their forces for the time being. Malfurion later assaulted Horde supply camps, murdering most of their members in one ambush and informing a troll leader that he and his army were coming for Sylvanas and the Horde. In the ensuing battle for Darkshore, he pushed the ancients and spirits of nature to join the Alliance in healing the land and battling their adversaries in Bashal Aran. He was then there aboard the Kulturan warship at Stormwind Harbor with the other Alliance leaders to witness the Kulturans handing the vessel to Anduin and rejoining the Alliance. Following the destruction of Enzoth, Malfurion and Tyrande and the Night Elf people built their home in Nordrassil. Malfurion and Tyrande have begun to disregarding any and all missives given to them by the young King Anduin Wrynn. In light of both the Cenarian Circle and the Earthen Ring feeling something dreadful inside the Spirit Realm, Malfurion and Tyrande consented for Thrall to meet with them with the condition that the Earthen Ring Yucca was there and for Thrall to provide what was owing. After Thrall and his friends, Bane Bloodhoof and Kaelia Menethil arrived, Malfurion, Tyrande, Chandra's Feathermoon and Maya of Shadowsong welcomed them with a chilly, tight silence. Thrall publicly apologized to Night Elves and described how the Horde wished to reform, leading Malfurion to offer Thrall the tiniest nod of understanding, signaling that he was listening. Tyrande claimed that she perceived their words as meaningless vows of justice, and that the moon became darker and more sinister, preparing to strike Thrall and his comrades. Fortunately, Malfurion comforted the Night Warrior and averted violence. Malfurion saw Thrall vow to give his wife the head of Sylvanas Windrunner. Malfurion was there in Bashal Aran and saw Tyrande's speech regarding Horde's loss in Darkshore. Within the visions of Ysera while in the Wild Seed, Malfurion may be seen consoling Tyrande Whisperwind. Saurfang and Sylvanas had talked strategy, even tactics, for days, and it had become evident that there was two massive inevitable sources of failure in their plan: Malfurion Stormrage and Tyrande Whisperwind. The commanders of the Night Elves were strong, deadly, and maybe even invincible on the field of war. No matter how astonished the Kaldorei might be by this invasion, those two would be a horror for the Horde once the combat started. Saurfang had to consider the idea that they could only fend off the Horde long enough for the Alliance to send aid, since they had lived for so long and had endured so much. After all, Ashenvale was their home. They'd enlist the help of Mother Nature. Malfurion Stormrage, the founder of the Cenarian Circle, is regarded as a prophet and savior to his people. The greatest druid to ever live, arguably one of the most powerful beings in history, and Tyrande Whisperwind dubbed him the wisest and most powerful of all the druids. He was described as unique, the greatest druid of the Night Elves had ever produced. Even during the War of the Ancients, when Malfurion Stormrage was still a student of druidism under Cenarius, he accomplished a great deal. Malfurion was able to breach Azshara's palace defenses by summoning massive roots from the earth, forcing Archimonde to flee after witnessing Malorn's death. Defeat Xavius by turning him into a tree, vanquish Hekard the Houndmaster with a ferocious lightning storm, and instantly kill Verothorn by drawing upon his world's natural energies. At the end of the war, he successfully healed Ysera after one of her wings was badly injured in aerial combat, and summoned a massive tornado at the heart of the Well of Eternity, which destroyed the Legion's portal and banished most of their ranks from Azeroth, resulting in the Great Sundering. By drawing on the primal connection between Azeroth and the Emerald Dream, Malfurion was able to defeat Xavius once more in the Emerald Nightmare, saving the inhabitants of his entire world from being consumed and corrupted by its darkness, and seemingly ending Nightmare's threat for several years. Using every ounce of his power at the Eye of the Vortex, the newly reawakened Malfurion prevented Darsho's landmass from being shat after assisting in the Fire Lord's eventual death in the Firelands, where he notably defended others from his flaming strikes utilizing his cloudburst ability. He was subsequently able to completely purify scenarios of the Nightmare's taint with enormous effort. During the War of the Thorns, Malfurion was able to easily defeat Varrock Saurfang, one of the Horde's mightiest and most experienced warriors and leaders, within seconds of facing him in direct combat, despite Saurfang's own private belief that if he were to fight Malfurion he would undoubtedly lose. Despite surprising and outnumbering the Night Elves by an odds of 8-1, Malfurion was able to fight evenly with Sylvanas' wrath, and appeared to be able to easily take advantage of Ashenvale's environment against his enemies, tearing their ranks asunder as he struck, and evening the odds such that Saurfang realized that there would be more Horde casualties than Kaldorei once the final numbers were tallied. Malfurion has been able to enlist the help of the Wisps, the departed spirits of his ancestors at times of extreme need and adversity. He first invoked the Dragon Aspect blessing upon Nordrassil with the Horn of Cenarius, allowing the Night Elves to defeat Archimonde and win the Third War. He most recently enlisted their help in the War of the Thorns, where they were able to incinerate nearly 100 armored Horde soldiers in seconds and then formed a massive protective wall capable of temporarily holding even Sylvanas and the Ents. During the Fourth War, Malfurion was able to use multiple engulfing roots to simultaneously destroy several goblin-piloted sputtering flesh renders, and single-handedly ambushed and killed the entire Horde supply party in minutes. He has also shown himself capable of flying and at Bashal Aran he called upon several powerful ancients, Shadebow, Gnarroot, Elder Branch, to assist the cult. Malfurion may also summon Trent allies to defend himself, call forth entangling roots to bind and constrain other powerful beings, and temporarily blind and weaken others with sunfire, and he once granted a young human orphan a pair of functional white wings. His abilities, however, are not limitless. He was defeated by the Shade of Xavius after allowing his anger and rage to take control of him, and further stated that his bond with the Emerald Dream makes him vulnerable to the rift of Awn's darkness. Despite his greatly enhanced senses and considerable knowledge as one of the Alliance's oldest and most experienced leaders, he is not infallible, as he was defeated by after Saurfang ambushed him. After conversing with the Druids in Moonglade, Bran Bronzebeard was offered a reason for Malfurion's odd coma. Someone had truly assaulted Malfurion. An unknown assailant recently did something to the Druids, renowned leader Malfurion Stormrage, and he had been in some sort of a catatonic state ever since. With the knowledge that the Cenarian Circle has an enemy powerful enough to incapacitate their leader, the Druids have become increasingly worried and suspicious. After speaking with some of the Druids here, I learned that some unusual and unsettling facts. The only Druids strong enough to possibly destroy Malfurion's efforts in the Emerald Dream are Remulos and Fandral Stackhelm, but maybe the betrayer wasn't a Druid at all. Malfurion is the Night Elves Druid's knowledgeable and steadfast commander. He has a fatherly demeanor about him, and he enjoys teaching others to new discoveries about themselves and the world around them. He likes to offer beneficial tips and guidance rather than immediately solving issues for people or providing entire solutions, so that others may discover things on their own. He thanks the Orc and human armies for their help against the Burning Legion, and he welcomes visitors of those races with open arms. He also has a deep admiration for Tauren and Dwarves. Malfurion, on the other hand, despises High Elves and Goblins and will expel them from Ashenvale if he comes across them. Malfurion is uninterested in Horde and Alliance politics, believing that the needs of his people and their environment are more important than what he considers to be petty rivalries between the races. Malfurion and his Druids will warmly welcome visitors who show proper respect for the natural environment and its inhabitants. Outriders are welcomed for a limited time with offers of shelter and food. The Night Elf's sacred home, however, is Ashenvale, and Malfurion does not appreciate or tolerate prolonged visits by members of other races. Occasionally, emissaries and adventurers are welcomed, but settlers and those who attempt to profit from the land are immediately expelled. Shandor Stormrage is best described as a stalwart, wise, and righteous. He has made it his mission to protect his beloved forests and Azeroth's sanctity of life. Malfurion has a difficult mission ahead of him. He must protect both the Kalimdor Woods and the Emerald Dream, an almost impossible feat. Malfurion has to be reminded that others can help him carry the load. Cenarius was his instructor, and the other Druids and Ancients are eager to assist their Shandor. The other thing Malfurion loves above nature and life is Tyrande, his lover. To live without her is not to live at all. In warfare, Malfurion draws on nature to help him in battle. He depends on summoned monsters, Trants, Dryads, Night Elf soldiers and other friends. He helps them with spells and serves as their general. If Malfurion is confronted alone, he frequently utilizes his spells and skills to flee into the woodlands and return later with help. Malfurion generally looks like a normal male Night Elf, with the exception of a pair of stag antlers growing from his head. Unlike most Night Elves with antlers, a blessing of Cenarius is considered to be a sign of future greatness. He grew them later in life, while other Night Elves, such as Brawl Baremantle, had them at birth. Since Malfurion's spirit spent many years in the Emerald Dream while his body slept, it started to take on attributes of his animal forms. He gained the attributes of a bird, feathers on arms, a cat, feet, and a bear. There are also glowing blue bolts along his arms, shoulders, chest, and stomach. His beard has also grown considerably longer than previously. The hue of Malfurion's hair is a little inconsistent. In Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos, and Warcraft 3, The Frozen Throne, it is depicted to be blue. However, the Well of Eternity cover displayed green. Furthermore, the action figure, various colorful photos, and the Warcraft 3 cinematic, and his World of Warcraft model indicated to be green. The majority of World of Warcraft and RPG graphics were the final sources provided, therefore it seems to be green. When he asks nature to give itself in order to cure others, he feels remorse. When he understood how much Xavius had endured, he felt terrible for him. And that is the lengthy but complete story of Malfurion Stormrage. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.